I want you to picture a meeting. Smart people in the room, real stakes on the table. The company is growing, product is working, market interest is real, and someone has finally called a meeting to sort out IP strategy. The CTO speaks first. Trade secrets, keep it internal, keep control, don't hand the roadmap to competitors through a public filing. The legal team pushes back. Patents, formal protection, enforceability. Without it, you're exposed. The CEO glances at the budget projections and wonders, how much is it actually going to cost us? And someone in the back, always someone in the back, says, can we just move fast and not overthink this? The meeting ends 19 minutes earlier. There's no decision. Or worse, a decision that nobody actually believes in, pushed through just to end the discomfort. 3 months pass. The strategy is inconsistent. Different parts of the company are doing completely different things, and nobody quite remembers why. Welcome to the most expensive meeting in IP strategy, and the one that keeps on happening day in and day out. I'm Maria Boicova-Wynants. This is What Would You Do? And today I'm taking apart one of the most common situations I see: team disagreement on IP strategy. Because it's almost never what it looks like on the surface. Here's what companies typically do when such a disagreement surfaces. They try to solve it as an information problem. They bring an outside counsel for a second opinion. They benchmark what competitors are doing. They commission a landscape analysis. They maybe schedule another meeting with better slides this time. And occasionally, this helps. More often than not, it doesn't. Because you haven't resolved the disagreement. You've just added more material to argue about. Well, look at it. CTO now has a paper that supports trade secrets. The legal team has a paper that supports the idea about patents. The CEO has a cost comparison that supports doing nothing. Everyone is better armed. Nobody has moved. What's happening here is a classic error in how organizations handle disagreement. They assume the disagreement is about the answer, but it's almost never about the answer. It's about what question each person thinks they're trying to answer. Let me translate this meeting for you. Because what sounds like a technical debate is actually three different people managing three different fears. The CTO is managing technical exposure. Their entire frame is, if this gets out, we lose the edge that took years to build. That's a real fear. That's not irrational by any means. The legal team is managing enforceability. Their frame is different. Their frame is that if we can't defend this in court, nothing else matters. That's also real, and that's also not irrational. The CEO, on the other hand, is managing runway. Their frame is, if we spend the next 6 months and 50,000 euros or whatever currency you're using in IP filings, we might simply not make payroll in Q3. That's also real. That's not irrational. So what you have is you have three rational people. You have three legitimate concerns and one completely unproductive meeting. Because here's what none of them have said out loud. We have not agreed on what we are protecting and why, and which risk we are most afraid of failing to manage. Let me repeat that. What are we protecting and why? And which risk we're most afraid of failing to manage? That is the conversation that needs to happen. And it's not a legal conversation. It's a strategic one. IP tools like patents, trade secrets, trademarks, even contracts, they are answers. But before you argue about answers, you have to agree on the question. And the question is always a business question. What is the asset here? What is it worth to us? Over what time horizon? Against which competitors? Under which market conditions? Until that is explicit and shared, the technical debate is just, noise. Just noise dressed up as progress, nothing else. Here's what I want you to understand about unresolved IP disagreements. They're not just inefficient. They're actively destructive because they don't stay in a meeting room. They leak into execution. The technical team makes decisions based on what they think the strategy is. The legal team documents based on their version. The business development team makes commitments to partners that cut across both. And nobody catches it until something has already been lost. Be it a licensing opportunity, a filing window, or a negotiation position. From the outside, the company looks like it has an IP strategy. From the inside, it's a patchwork of individual decisions that were never coordinated. And that patchwork is visible to investors who do due diligence, to acquirers who run M&A processes, and to partners who look very carefully at the contract terms and wonder who is actually in charge. The cost of unresolved disagreement is not just the decision you didn't make. It's the credibility that you bleed quietly over time in rooms you don't even know you're being evaluated in. So, what would I actually do? First, I would stop the technical debate. Not permanently. Those conversations matter. But until we've done the prior work, because patent or trade secrets, to begin with, it's never or. But this is not the first question. It's the third question. The fourth question doesn't matter. And jumping to it is what makes those meetings go in circles. The first question is, what are we actually trying to protect? And why does it matter to the business? And not in legal language, in business language. Revenue streams, market position, competitive mode, valuation multiple, acquisition readiness. Pick the frame that actually drives decisions in your organization. Because until everyone is answering the same business question, they will keep on giving technically correct answers to completely different problems. Second, I would make the risks explicit. And I mean brutally explicit. Not if we don't patent, we are exposed. That's too vague to decide on. I mean, what specifically happens in what timeline with what probability if we take each of the possible paths? What does losing look like? What does winning look like? Which loss is survivable and which one is fatal? This will be different for different companies. When you force people to be that specific, two things happen. The genuine risks become clear, and the phantom risks, the ones driven by instinct or identity rather than evidence, tend to dissolve. That conversation alone already resolves about half of these disagreements. Third, I would assign a decision owner, one person with actual authority. This sounds obvious. It almost never happens. You see, IP strategy is not a democracy. It's not a consensus exercise. It's a decision with long-term consequences. And diffuse ownership is the fastest route to no decision at all. Someone has to own it, commit to it publicly, and stand behind it when it gets questioned, because it will. Who that person is depends on the company, but it has to be someone. A name, a mandate, an accountability. Fourth, and this one cuts against the instinct to resolve everything cleanly. I would simplify the strategy. not unified. Because here's the thing, the CTO, the legal team, and the CEO are often all right. Not about the conclusion, about the asset they're looking at. Different parts of your IP portfolio carry different risk profiles and different strategic value. Some elements are genuinely in favor of being justified by patents. Others are better protected as trade secrets, disclosed to nobody, never filed, kept internal with operational discipline. Some are about the brand positioning, some are about execution speed. The strength is not in choosing one tool, it's in knowing precisely which tool serves which asset and deploying them deliberately. That's not complexity, that's precision. Disagreement inside a team is not a problem. Let me be clear about that. Disagreement is information. It tells you that people are thinking about business from all the different possible angles, carrying different risks, protecting different things, and that is valuable. That is what you want in a leadership team. The problem is when disagreement becomes unresolved disagreement, when it loops instead of converging, when meeting ends without a decision and everyone leaves thinking someone else is going to handle it. That's where damage happens. Not in the debate, in the drift. The work is not to silence the disagreement, it's to get underneath it, to align on the business question, surface the real risks, put a name on the decision, and then actually move cleanly, explicitly with everyone who matters actually on board. That sounds straightforward, I understand. And I know from experience that it rarely is. But it's always worth doing before the conversation degrades into politics. Because once it becomes political, you're not deciding on IP strategy anymore. You're simply managing egos. And that's a much more expensive problem. These alignment conversations, getting a leadership team to move from debate to decision, are the kind of work I frequently do with founders and executives. It's not just about the legal architecture, it's essentially the decision process underneath it. It's managing that decision process. Because in my experience, IP structure is rarely the hard part. Getting the room to agree on what matters, that's the hard part. Thanks for listening to What Would You Do? In the next episode, I will address the question, what would you do if you could protect it, but it slows you down? Because sometimes the risk is not that you are exposed, it's that you're so focused on protection that you stop moving. And that's a very particular kind of trap. And it catches very smart people. So until next time, and in the meantime, think clearly, decide better.